As an ADHDer, when we're highly motivated and we're really excited about things, we get bursts of dopamine. We go above the dopamine baseline.
I know that you see ADHD as a superpower. Why do you see it that way?
If you get the right help that you need for your ADHD, you can thrive. You can do things that neurotypicals cannot. You can create things that neurotypicals cannot.
You were interviewed recently by Forbes, an article, How ADHD Can Be an Asset in the Workplace.
We can get to the heart of the matter a lot faster than neurotypicals very often. We might not be able to describe the steps in getting there, but we can very often problem solve and get to the answer quicker.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, a podcast about growth, mindset, and entrepreneurship. I'm Moshe Popack, and today we chat about ADHD with Brooke Schnittman. Brooke is a certified ADHD coach who has over 20 years of experience working with individuals with ADHD and over 21 years of leadership experience. She's also the author of Activate Your ADHD Potential, and she'll share expert tips on how to thrive personally and professionally with ADHD. Hi, Brooke, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Moshe.
For the layperson who doesn't understand about ADHD or what is ADHD, I think that's a good starting point. What's a good way to explain what ADHD is?
Sure. So it's a brain-based disorder. It's neurological. It's not developed over time. It might show more over time based on life circumstance, but you had to be born with it. So just to give you some examples of the symptoms of ADHD, you might have distractibility, you might have daydreaming, hyperactivity internally or externally. And for women, very often it's internally. So that's why there's such late diagnoses for women compared to the boys in the classroom who usually have the external distractibility where they can't sit still, they have to move around, they fidget. Working memory can be a problem. Emotions can be an issue. Organization. So people with ADHD have executive dysfunction. And just to give a little bit more information, as you develop in life, there can be other things that mimic ADHD symptoms, such as TBIs. So that's traumatic brain injury. When you get older, your executive functions break down. Dementia can cause executive function breakdown. So those are not ADHD, but it can mimic some of the ADHD symptoms. You have to be born with it. It is highly genetic and hereditary. So if you have a child with it, most likely one of the parents have it. And that's usually how parents find out that they have ADHD through a child.
Because I also have ADHD, and I thought could the circumstances of your childhood make the ADHD symptoms come out more? Meaning it might be genetic, but it might be also, is it also partial your circumstances?
Yes. So nature versus nurture. So there's epigenetics. So you can have the ADHD in you, right? And because of the circumstances being challenging, highly stressful, or less structure, you don't have your parents or your teachers creating that structure for you, or perhaps you have a very unique childhood, maybe you're adopted, or you have abusive parents, or it doesn't feel safe. Your ADHD symptoms can manifest earlier than in someone who's in a safer household, someone who has parents who might act as their executive functions, or has a teacher who might act as their executive functions.
Interesting. The concept of executive dysfunction, explain a little bit about that. What would be the executive functions, and what would be executive dysfunction?
The executive functions are in the prefrontal cortex of our brain. It's in the frontal lobe. Everyone has the prefrontal cortex with the executive function. So now people with ADHD, they have an issue in one or more of the areas in their executive function. So Dr. Thomas Brown talks about the 6 clusters of ADHD. And one is emotion, one is attention. So he's talking about sustained attention or shifting attention. Another one is the ability to get started. So that's initiation. Another one is sustained effort. So there's 6 clusters. If one of those areas are not working properly, right, all of them are not working properly. So executive dysfunction is where your executive functions are not working properly. So he calls executive dysfunction ADD syndrome, in lay's term, ADHD.
And then someone that has ADHD, what are the top 2 or 3 major challenges that they have to focus on, have intention to work through as they go through society?
Yeah, good question. So everyone's symptoms can manifest differently, but I would say the big one is distractibility and hyperactivity. So hyperactivity can be internal or external, like we spoke about. So for women, it's very often as racing thoughts. It can also be for men too. So thinking that people don't like you, being called highly sensitive, being an empath, having rejection sensitivity or rejection sensitive dysphoria. Dr. Dodson talks about that. So that means you perceiving that other people are thinking something about you that's not true, or you thinking something about yourself that's not true. So creating these stories, like, for an example, if someone says, okay, or thinks, you might think, oh my God, they hate me. But that's not the reality of it. So we're very often called with ADHD highly sensitive. And that's because of our rejection sensitive dysphoria, which comes from our emotional dysregulation, which comes from our executive dysfunction.
Yeah, I relate to, it took me a long time to understand that rejection sensitive dysphoria. I would think, I guess I do consider myself, I just feel deeply. So you can't explain to someone that's a deep empath to someone that doesn't feel what's the big deal, right? They'll say to you, what's the big deal? But you're just in yourself and you're talking, right? It is a big deal for you. And then tools, right? You work, I have a life coach for 13 years working on tools. But for the listener,
I think everyone needs a coach.
Right.
Even coaches need coaches.
Right. We kind of coach each other now at this point. We're friends. So it's like that. But what would be a tool, like a practical tool for the listeners? Like they have ADHD and they have this, because I think it's a thing, right? It's this sensitivity.
Yes.
What can they do to deal with that?
So I would start at the hierarchy of need level. I talk about this in my book, Activate Your ADHD Potential. So step 1, treat yourself like you would treat anyone else. And we always treat people better than we treat ourselves. So treat yourself at the basic level, like a baby. What does a baby need? What does a child need? Do they need sleep? Do they need food? Do they need water? Do they need to go outside and get air? Do they need to be in the sun? Think about the things that you're not attending to. And I promise you, if you start attending to them more regularly, your sensitivity, you'll still be sensitive, but it will be less. Because when we're running on empty, or we think of the classic sign, right? A water glass, right? And we have no more water, right? We're giving to everyone else. So we're empty. If we're empty, we can't give to ourselves. We can't give to anyone else. So fill up your cup, do the basic things while you're building on small little actions for yourself, like productivity-wise or confidence-wise. So make sure you're attending to your reliable sleep. Make sure you're eating every 3 to 4 hours if you can. Make sure you're drinking water. Make sure that you are getting your supplements, your nutrients that you need. You're taking your medication if you are prescribed medication. You are being around things that bring you joy and The
dopamine thing, because I could see myself being, as a frame of reference, right? Because I have ADHD, so I'm thinking about myself. Do people with ADHD have a general tendency to be extreme nature? Is that how, because of the hyperactivity, or like that need for dopamine, maybe, right? In other words, it has to just be healthy dopamine, right? Because you can get dopamine from unhealthy places too.
Yeah. A lot of ADHDers have addiction issues because our dopamine levels are so dysregulated. And when I say addiction, it's not like the typical drugs, sex, alcohol. It could be, but we can be workaholics. That's the healthier addiction, as my psychiatrist says.
Right.
So, yeah, we have either a lot of dopamine or really low dopamine. We don't get that neurotransmitter like neurotypicals do. The neurotypicals get drips of dopamine throughout the day. As an ADHDer, when we're highly motivated and we're really excited about things, we get bursts of dopamine. We go above the dopamine baseline. When we're not motivated, when we're not excited about something, we have really low dopamine. So when we have low dopamine, it's really hard to just say to an ADHDer, just do it.
Right.
Like that doesn't work the same way. So yeah, a lot of people with ADHD are chasing the dopamine, especially when the dopamine's low. So there are these thrill chasers. There's adrenaline junkies. There's, people who are doing like Ironman. I mean, the creator of Ironman has ADHD. So yeah.
Yes. And I know, and I agree with you. I know that you see ADHD as a superpower. Why do you see it that way?
Yeah. So I want to be very transparent here, and I appreciate you asking because I know I get a lot of hate when I share this. So please, whoever's listening, listen from beginning to end. Okay. If you get the right help that you need for your ADHD, you can thrive. That's it. You can do things that neurotypicals cannot. You can create things that neurotypicals cannot. Albert Einstein, Simone Biles. I mean, I can go on and on and on, of really amazing, powerful people. The smartest person in the world, the strongest person in the world, they have ADHD because they leaned into their strengths and they pushed off the distractions. If we focus on our intuition and we trust our gut and we get the right tools and support, if we're lucky enough to be able to get that, whether it be from a friend, a family member, even online, or if you, let's say, find the right person that you pay to get the right tools, you can thrive and you can do way more than a neurotypical person in the sense of creativity, in the sense of being an amazing entrepreneur. You can do, I'll just leave it at that.
It's interesting, the creativity side, only since two things. I mean, I guess I always had that in me, but I was always like, okay, let me go into business because I want to take care of my family. But I guess the most rewarding for me, what I feel, doing this podcast, I started, recently, I love music, started playing piano. I on the creative side,
Yes.
right? So you have to find, again, those healthy outlets that work. In the business, I know you were interviewed recently by Forbes, an article, how ADHD can be an asset in the workplace. How do you see that practically? What are specific ways that ADHD can help in the workplace?
We can get to the heart of the matter a lot faster than neurotypicals very often. We might not be able to describe the steps in getting there, but we can very often problem solve and get to the answer quicker. We can see these creative routes of getting there. We don't have a linear brain. So we can think abstractly and create fresh new solutions.
I think that every day, my main business is real estate, but every day I am dealing with problems. In law school, I somehow got into law school, but when I got there, I mean, Imagine,
A lot
right?
of people with ADHD love being like going into being a lawyer. And then once they become a lawyer, they're like, I don't know about this.
Right. So that's my story. So I end up taking my first exam, completely bombed my exam. Luckily, it was a practice exam, and I called my brother, and I'm like, I'm going to fail out of law school because I don't know how to read or write. In other words, I also have dyslexia too, so I have like ADHD. And then, so what happened was, I went to the table of contents, and then through some wacky, again, I cannot explain it, but so I know there's 20 subjects in the entire book. It's 1,000 pages. So it's like, oh, these are contracts, and these are all the law subjects. And then from then, in whatever my way is, to your point, then I was able to get straight A's.
Yeah.
And then, so when I have meetings, and there'll be, stacks of, spreadsheets and all that, how I get there, I don't know. But my visual is numbers now. That's my visual. So I'm like, okay, let me rely on something. Numbers never lie. Hopefully it's good numbers. But with that, and then also trying to understand people, the combination of the two.
But you also have that accountability from your life coach, right? To go back and look at the numbers.
Completely.
Sometimes out of sight, out of mind with ADHD. And those numbers can be very mundane, but they're so important in running a business, right?
I love what you said also about everybody should have a coach. I just want to bring that up for a second because and that accountability. Someone keeping you accountable, he made me sit in every part of my weakness to become deeply self-aware, right? So when you have ADHD, right, it's not linear. You're all over the place. And no, let's write. Let's do homework. Let's think about it. Let's sit in it. Let's look at the emotions of it. And it's been, like I said, 13 years. But I think that's a great tool for someone that has ADHD, such as myself, right? I was all over the place, like really just low dopamine, really. And then slowly building up over these years to have a sense of gratitude, right? Sense of purpose.
Without self-awareness, true self-awareness, we're just chasing things. And we don't know why, but we are. And then we feel worse about ourselves when we can't see it through. So that's why that self-awareness is everything. And we can't get that until we have someone mirroring us or we have the tools to go deep, like you mentioned.
How do you have conversation? I found this through the years. How do you explain to somebody that they actually hear, if you have this ADHD, how do you communicate that to someone who doesn't have that, and that they understand and that it could be healthy relationship? How do you do that?
Yeah, so it depends who the person is. Is this someone that you trust very well? If it is, then you ask them, hey, can I share with you about how my brain works? Because I think it would be helpful for you to understand me a little bit more. And of course, hopefully they'll say yes. And then you could say, these are the things that I'm really good at. These are the things that I get bored with or I'm not as good at. Is there a way that we could maybe meet in the middle? So I could do the things that I'm really good at and you could do the things that you're really good at, like in a relationship. If I think there's different ways to tell different people. So if, again, highly trusting people, you tell them, you know how this is really simple for you. It's not. My brain works this way. Or, you know how you can go in social situations and, speak the room and be able to communicate back and forth throughout the week and have friends that you've initiated with and stay on top of your finances. Mine don't work that way. So I need some help with that. I'm usually not the initiator. I usually need a reminder to communicate with my friends. It's not that I don't like you. It's because I literally forget about it, out of sight, out of mind. So I would learn about how your ADHD impacts you, because everyone's ADHD impacts different. I heard from someone that there's 6,000 different ways ADHD can impact someone because ADHD is complex, right? And usually it's not just ADHD. There's usually something else as well. So what shows up for you? What do you love? What are you good at? What are you not good at? And talk it through. You can also show someone an Instagram clip that you relate to. You can show them an article. If it's someone who likes to read, you could show them a book that really resonated with you that describes your ADHD.
I like that. The way that they will, you have to always go to that. I always think, how will this person in front of me understand? Right? So it's always like breaking it down that way. But also, recently, you talk about also check if you trust them. Trust is a huge issue in society, I feel. It used to be, I was reading an article where it was saying, even a generation ago, your core secrets, that's, we all have our stuff that we go through. It used to be you'd be able to tell 2 or 3 people. Nowadays, it's like 0, which is tough, right?
That's really tough.
If you can't give over the things that you're dealing with to one person, right? And that's pretty prevalent. That would be ideal in society if we can have people we trust, right? Because you've been burned so many times. So you want to...
Especially with ADHD. By the age of 10, we're receiving 20,000 more negative messages than the neurotypical person. So that's where a lot of the RSD comes from as well, the rejection sensitivity, because of all of the negativity that we receive. So trust is hard, and then you have to drop your ego as well.
To go to 0, yes. What happened with me, I guess, with the life coach, you just get tired of that negative loop. So then, right, you're so sick and tired, right? And then you're like, okay, whatever it takes. So you never want to go back to that kind of space. But also explaining that, because in society they may say, oh, that's selfish, what you're doing, the things that you need, like, I got to take time in the sun, or need that to recharge, or I need just time by myself with my music, or because I have whatever my tools that I use to go through my day.
Yeah.
And, it seems that other people don't need that. I try to...
I don't know if they don't need it or they're just not attending to it. Like someone who is gone through life coaching and professional and self-development. So yeah, maybe someone doesn't need to take as many breaks, or they might not have that overstimulation that so many ADHDers have. But I think that more people, and Huberman talks about this, they need to go outside and take breaks. They just don't.
Right. And I know with children, I a few of my kids do, I believe, not all of them have been tested. A few of them do have ADHD. So what would be, as a parent, good ways to deal in the most healthy way with a child with ADHD?
You have to get to the basic level. I was talking about this with some of my adult clients yesterday in a group. So you have to really understand your child. And the only way to understand your child is to observe them and be around them and be present. With 2 parents working these days and us getting so caught up in social media and distractions, it's harder and harder. So pause and really connect and be intentional about spending time with your kids. Even if it's an hour a day, like make that uninterrupted time if you can. And start looking at the positives that they're doing. Once you start pointing out the positives, then you change the way that you're looking at them and they open up more to you. And start asking them questions. They might not answer right away because they might not be used to it, but ask them some more targeted questions about their interests. And then in order to help them with their ADHD, hopefully they'll come around. So the more you're present, the more you engage in what they're interested in, then you could start looking into their ADHD and say, okay, I mean, what is being impacted here? Is it the education? Is it their behavior at home? Like finding out what's going on with them. If it's the behavior at home, perhaps we need some positive reinforcement plans that they help you create. Perhaps they need a boost in their medication. Perhaps they're not getting enough sleep at night and they're exhausted at the end of the day. Perhaps they're holding it all in during school and they're exploding at home. Perhaps they're doing it because they don't feel like they're getting that attention that they need during the day. There's all different reasons why things can be the way that they are with kids. So we need to meet them where they're at. But in order to meet them where they're at, we need to be present and be attentive to their needs. Then once you figure out what it is, you can behaviorally, like I mentioned, help them. You can get an executive function coach. You can work with them and set up routines and systems. ADHDers hate systems, but thrive on them at the same time. And if that behavioral support is enough, wonderful. If it's not, then perhaps consider the medication route on top of the behavioral things, because we need tools to help us with our unique brain. And the medication won't give us the tools, but it will help us regulate our dopamine.
Because I look at my kids and I look at kids in general, and I was like, it's always like the kids are right over the adults. Like adults are just like, we're like robots in the system. There's all these systems. Yeah. But I'm like, the kids, especially kids with like ADHD, I mean, they seem to be the most creative. And it's like, okay, right, we can stick with these broken things. Or don't you want like people with a vision, with a creativity to like...
Yes.
Right? I mean,
Yes.
Right? I mean, but society doesn't see it.
An interesting thing happened yesterday, if you don't mind me interrupting you. Sorry, I interrupt.
No, interruption.
I have ADHD. Good. My name is Brooke. I have two stepsons with ADHD, and they manifest differently. The younger one is having more difficulty because he has major anxiety. The older one is really smart, and he's able to compensate in many ways, and he doesn't need as much help. So we go to the Inter Miami game last night. And of course, the younger one forgot that he has more homework to do. Now, I feel bad because I'm his executive function coach at home. But long story short, it slipped away from us yesterday because of the soccer game. Anyway, he has to fill out a crossword puzzle for his social studies packet. And he's a very by the book type of student. So he says, Brookie, can you help me? And he has dyslexia too. Brookie, can you help me find where this answer is? So I usually give him like a paragraph to look at to find the answer rather than giving him the answer, because a packet is too overwhelming for him. The older one goes, just Google it and get the answer. Now, who's wrong?
Right. Yeah. Right.
So the younger one says, oh, that's cheating. It is, right? But at the same time, like, is he going to even remember these answers the way that he's doing it at 11 o'clock at night? So, everyone works differently, ADHD or not. So I think we have to shift the way that we've been taught, and like society has made us, right? And be more open-minded, like you said.
I know you also have a book that you wrote, Activate Your ADHD Potential, a 12-step journey from chaos to confidence for adults with ADHD. What are your top 2 or 3 key takeaways from your book?
So with ADHD, we are in a cycle of overwhelm and underwhelm and everything in between, sometimes at the same time, but definitely multiple times a day. So in order to get out of it, we need to start with the basic needs, which is what we spoke about in the beginning, right? Attending to what you're not attending to. In order to be productive, in order to be confident, you have to take care of yourself. So take a deeper look, reflect, do those things. And at the same time, do 1% action towards your goals, and do that with accountability. So we give 12 actual steps to get there. And it starts with self-awareness, as we spoke about. Then you can bring in the time management strategies, but without self-awareness, you can't have time management strategies. And then you become more confident and you can stretch yourself and your goals and your beliefs and have those uncomfortable conversations that you've been avoiding.
Amazing. And obviously you do a lot of coaching. What are the main, is it only with clients with ADHD, or is it other symptoms that you work with?
Yeah, I work with other symptoms. Primarily it is ADHD, but executive functioning issues. So if someone is having a difficult time with organization, I can help them. If someone needs help with their business, I can help them. If someone needs help with procrastination, I can help them. I have my coaches who also work with students. So we work from 8 to 80. And if the student has autism and ADHD, we can work with them. So as we know, ADHD is complex. Anxiety, depression, OCD, lots of different things, learning disabilities. We work with that. So we help with executive functioning as a whole, those 6 clusters that we spoke about. And we also specialize in ADHD.
I love that. And Brooke, what's something that you're grateful for?
I'm grateful for my never-ending perseverance. Seriously. I'm sure like you, I've been through a lot, and I did not know I had ADHD until 6 years ago. And I was bullied literally until I received coaching. And I have always persevered, even though through the darkest times, I continue to just put one foot forward and look forward and try to see what's next and make a more optimistic space for myself, my family, my friends. So I would say that.
Yeah. It's amazing. I look at, I was just telling my wife the other day, the worst things that ever happened to me, all of them ended up being the best things that ever happened. For sure. It actually is that way. When you're going through it, you want it to end, but that's the truth about life. And what's something about you that people don't know?
The bullying is usually something people don't know. Another thing is that I did not get married until 36. I dated a lot of people with ADHD, and I didn't know I had ADHD at the time. So I did not find my person. I went through a lot of people who weren't right. And so when you find out who you are at the core and what you want for yourself, and you create those boundaries, you can figure out the rest. So if you're listening and you haven't found your person, or you haven't found your thing, or you haven't found what's next for you, take a step back for a second. Most people are there in some way, shape, or form, and learn about yourself, pause, and be grateful, and it will come if you really stay true to what you want in yourself, not what other people want.
It's a hard journey. That's a hard journey, but that is the truth, right? And then putting out, how could people know what you need if you don't communicate that? And the only way you can do that is become self-aware, right? And you just say it. This is what it is. This has been really eye-opening, I know for me personally, and hopefully for all the audience. But Brooke, how can people learn more about you, get your book, follow you on social?
Yeah, so our biggest platform is Instagram. I think that's where we found each other. So it's Coaching with Brooke with an E. And on my website, Coaching with Brooke, you can find my book. There's a lot of downloadables with executive function and ADHD, free resources there. So I would say those are the 2 biggest platforms.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed my conversation with Brooke. Next week, I'm going back in the guest chair, and I'm going to be asked everything from A to Z, professional and personal. So check it out. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please make sure to like, comment, or subscribe, and I'll talk to you again next week.